So I started the project Brothers in Arms over the pandemic in 2020, probably a little before about 2019. And it was part of a larger project that was Brothers in Arms. But I decided to actually divide the two albums because of genre. So I released Brothers in Arms in 2023, and that featured Joe Satriani and Jeff Duncan from Armored Saint and a lot of heavy guys like Vinnie Moore from UFO. And then I released in 2024 this new album, Beyond the Warrior's Eyes. It was more of a jazz fusion, maybe slash prog rock project. It features some of the world's greatest fusion guys. I have Jean Luc Ponty on a track, Eric Johnson, Robben Ford, Dean Brown from David Sanborn, John Tropea from Billy Cobham, Steve Morse from the Dixie Dregs and Deep Purple. I also have Larry McCray from, he actually is a great blues artist, and he's actually a part of an album that John Mayall and the Blues Breakers had done. Of course, my good friend Hal Lindes from Dire Straits, and a violinist that a lot of people don't know, and his name is Steve Kindler. Now, Steve Kindler was Jan Hammer's violin player for years on the road and for his albums. And he also played with Jeff Beck. Now, one of the most classic records that really inspired me as a teenager when I first got it in the 70s was Jeff Beck live with Jan Hammer Group. And the soloing is incredible. There's a violinist playing there, trading solos back and forth with Jan Hammer and Jeff Beck. And that is Steve Kindler. Now, Steve Kindler originally was in Mahavishnu Orchestra, and he was in the band when Jean Luc Ponty was in the band, and then he basically replaced Jean Luc Ponty when Jean Luc left. So the album is dedicated to the hope for the warriors, and I really like to, try to give back to the veteran community. And they give mental health, and they give reconditioning physically, and they do a lot of great things for veterans. So I push for people to actually donate to them, and there's a page that you can donate for the album to the veterans. How I got so involved with veterans' causes was my dad was in World War II. He was a veteran in 1943 to 46. I think he served in the South Pacific. And, he instilled upon me what GIs and veterans' needs were and what they were going through at the time. And of course, in World War II, nobody knew PTSD, and nobody really kind of addressed those kinds of problems. Also, growing up in New York City in the 60s and the 70s, I saw returning veterans from the Vietnam War, and they were always homeless, and they were on the subway and missing limbs and begging for money. And I always thought it was such a shame that this country did not help them, because truly, they gave their lives and their limbs, their life for this country. And it was a very dark time for, Vietnam and Vietnam veterans, because the war wasn't popular, but it wasn't their fault. And so I thought, well, I wish I could, do something. And through music, I was able to kind of reflect what I was thinking and feeling. I also did a short stint in the Army on the ROTC back in the mid-'80s when I was going to school in New Paltz University. So I went down to basic training at Fort Knox, and so I got a feel for what they did, what they went through, how they're prepared, what their mental psyche was. So with all of that kind of in the mixer, it just made me much more aware of veterans' problems, and that's kind of why I got involved. I think the best way for people to help veterans is to basically give back to them. Maybe not in so much money, but maybe, volunteer at a VA office, hospital. Some of the things that have been plaguing, veterans have been plaguing them probably since the ancient times. Things like depression, anxiety, PTSD. Homelessness is a big problem, substance abuse. So I think that, if we could try to help them out, it would be great. If you want to donate, you can go to the Fisher House Foundation. I've used them in the past. The one that Beyond the Warrior's Eyes is hopeforthewarriors.org. I've done several of these records in the past 10 years to make people aware of it. The first one I did was Guitars for Wounded Warriors. And the next one was a vocal album that I did with Phil Naro. Unfortunately, he passed away, but he was Billy Sheehan's lead singer, and from the band Talus. And that was called Band of Brothers. And then I did one, Guitars for Veterans. That was an instrumental. And then I did Brothers in Arms, which came out last year. And of course, this year's Beyond the Warrior's Eyes. So I feel that if anybody can help, go to those sites, or even just try to donate some time to veterans. Even if you see a veteran in the bar or restaurant, just go up and thank him. You'd be surprised how many people don't get thanked, and it's very rare. I remember thanking one when I saw him in a pub once, and he's like, that is so rare. Thank you very much, because nobody ever thanks us. Yeah, I love collaborating with other artists. One of the reasons is because you get a fresh set of ears onto the song, and they can bring things into the song that you weren't thinking about at all. So I think it's like a healthy way of creating as well, because if you get stuck in your own head as an artist, it kind of gets stale after a while, and you can start repeating yourself. Like when I had written this song, the title track, Beyond the Warrior's Eyes, I really thought of Jean Luc Ponty. I mean, I thought that was a perfect track for him. It was really up his alley, and it was kind of taking back to the 70s kind of funk, rock, jazz, fusion days. So when I sent it to him, he really liked it, and I was very happy about that. I do a lot of these. When I think of the artist, I write and compose the song thinking of them in particular. Another one was Quiet Desperation with Robben Ford. I thought that would be perfect for him. It was a very bluesy type track, almost like kind of a British bluesy early 70s type thing, and I could hear him on it. Another track that I really like is the Gates of Valhalla. And again, I wrote that with Eric Johnson in mind, because I felt that his flavor, his tone, and his approach would be really good for the track. One of the big tracks on there that was a huge production was A Soldier's Journey. And that took you on an entire journey, I felt, from beginning to end. That is why I called it that. I used the Budapest Orchestra basically in Europe to record all of the string parts. And then I had Steve Kindler come in and do some solos and some different tracks on it, because Steve has this cool, like, overdriven violin tone, and I thought it would be great for this song. And it was challenging because I had to actually get all the charts ready for the song and send the Pro Tools session to them, and then they had to send the Pro Tools session back, and it was, a little different from what I usually work in. So, because I don't really work with a lot of live orchestras, but this was really a lot of fun. It was great. It came out wonderful, and it's very cinematic, and that's kind of what I was going for with this whole vibe. And I'm really happy with the way it came out. Speed of Sound, yeah, the video won a Best Video of the Year by the Josie Music Awards in Nashville. And that's featuring Joe Satriani and myself. And it was a great honor. And the video is really, really cool. It's an AI video that I got this director in Italy to do. It was a very experimental thing. I didn't know if anybody was going to get it or would like it. And it seemed to draw a lot of reaction, and I really enjoyed it. You know, I wrote that song, you know, sitting basically on my sun porch when I was living up in Woodstock, New York. And I wrote the riff, and the riff I really developed, and I thought, oh man, you know what? This is perfect for Joe Satriani. And so I went into the studio and I developed the song further with putting live drums on it and basically recording all the guitar parts and the bass parts and the melodies. And then I contacted Joe because I had known Joe from a show that I do here in Florida. It's on 89.5 FM called Guitar Tracks on WFIT.org. And it actually, he really got it, really dug it, and he thought it was good. And then, you know, I mean, in a matter of a couple weeks, he sent it back to me, and it was wonderful. And so we both thought, well, man, this is the song that a video should be all about, and it should be, you know, actually take off and start the album of Brothers in Arms, which came out last year. So that was a real, you know, mind-bending experience, because Joe was one of my big influences in the 80s when he came out with Surfing with the Alien, when I saw, wow, somebody other than like a fusion guy like Jeff Beck in the 70s can have an instrumental record and do so well on the charts and on MTV and sell so many records. I knew there was, you know, basically a desire for people to hear that kind of music. So I kind of incorporated his style with Jeff Beck. I draw a lot of things from a lot of what I listen to. And it was a great honor to work with Joe, and Joe is such a wonderful guy, and he actually has killer stories about his career. Okay, this is the fun stuff, right? So how I produce these records, I work in a combination of analog and digital. So what my main thing and the main centerpiece of this entire studio is this Trident. It's a Trident 24 from 1986. I have a very interesting story with this. I had a Les Paul Ace Frehley Budokan guitar, and a guy down in southern Florida in Hollywood had this desk. It was actually probably another 5 feet each way. It came from a studio in Hollywood, California. Now, what I did was I took off the producer's desk there, and I kept the patch bay over here. Now, and it actually had another producer's desk over that way, and so I took the whole thing off. The desk needed to be reconditioned from top to bottom, so I did a straight trade for the desk, the new power supply that he had, for the Budokan. This is incredible, but that's what I did. And then I had a couple techs, it took me a couple years, to redo the entire desk, recapped it, put all switches where they needed to be, completely new faders everywhere, P&G faders. And there's only one place in the world that has parts, and that's in, of course, the UK, because this is from the UK. And I love this desk. It's great. It's the London edition, and it sounds amazing. I love the mic pre's. I love the EQs. You know, everything they say about Trident's great. Before this, I had a Trimix that I had completely reconditioned. It was two Trimixes together, and that was incredible sounding, but it had a lot of problems, that particular desk, with grounding issues. So I don't have that issue with this at all. So I absolutely love Trident. I've had their EQs, the CB EQs that they had from the 70s and the 80s. I've had everything from Trident. Trident's really one of my favorite absolute ones. That and, of course, Rupert Neve. Now, basically, the way I recorded the album was a lot of it came through this guy. This is my Les Paul Custom, 1999, I believe, from the Custom Shop. It's got Seymour Duncans in it. I think a Duncan Distortion 59. And I did a lot of that on there. I also have a Gibson Explorer that I did a lot. I also had a Strat, you know, Jeff Beck Strat that I used, Signature Series. It's great. And I also have this one right here. I made this guitar. It's a gold top and a double cutaway Les Paul with a basically an EVH Frankenstein and a 59. And it's a great guitar, brass nut. And it sounds awesome. And I use this on a lot of recordings as well. So, and I also have a Larry Carlton Sire signature that I used on the album, and basically it was a Gibson Midtown with P90s that I used on the album. I used a lot of different guitars on Beyond the Warrior's Eyes because it's like having the whole crayon box. I need all the colors to get all of the tones and all of the flavors. So basically I go through all of this. I go have a 2-inch tape machine, an MTR 90 from 1984. And I recorded all the basic tracks on there, the drums, guitar, bass. Then I transferred everything into Logic. And from Logic on, I used all of the, you know, the great digital magic that we have. And because I did this over the pandemic had everybody in lockdown, which is one of the reasons why I was able to get such great players, because everybody was home, you know, kind of twiddling their thumbs, wondering what are we going to do. And I thought this was a perfect time to be creative, to do a great record. And so I was able to fly everything in. Now, from that point, I took it back to analog. I took it right back to 2-inch tape, because I wanted the compression, the tape compression. And then from there, I mixed it down to an Ampex 440C, and that's 1/4-inch tape. And from the 1/4-inch tape, I took it to Boulder, Colorado, to my dear friends Jeff Gray and also David Glasser at Airshow Mastering, and they mastered it right off of tape. And that's what you hear. And that's the way I do records. That's the way I do everything. One of my favorite mic pre's is I have this VA 1073, which is fantastic. I love Audioscape. A big shout out to Chris Yetter. He is awesome. I have basically everything he's got. He's got a great mic pre that's awesome on guitar, incredible. He's got 1176s that I have. He's got these really amazing things down here that are you know, an LA2A. He's got a Pultec MEQ. He's got the full EQ of the Pultec. Can't say enough great things about him. So basically I went through that. And I would use like a kind of a 2-mic system, or possibly a 1-mic system on the amp, depending upon the texture I wanted and depending upon the track, of course, itself. And, you know, I use a lot of outboard effects. I'm not an in-the-box guy, to be honest with you. So I have an Eventide 4000, Eventide 3000, a GTR 4000. You know, I have an Eclipse. I use all of those, and I have LA4As that are great. I love them to death. I have, you know, the Rupert Neve compressors, the 5043s, I believe. Also, Pultec makes this great JDK EQ. That is awesome on guitars. I use that. And of course, the Neve 33609. This is an early version. I think it's a C. And of course I have the Master Bus processor by Rupert Neve. That is my bus compressor, and I put everything through there. Absolutely amazing. So that's really a quick rundown of what I've used. Okay, here's the live room, which is full of amps, and this is my Mad Studio. Rivera. This was used on a number of tracks on Beyond the Warrior's Eyes. This actually was used on the Robben Ford track, The Quiet Desperation, and I believe I used this also on Gates of Valhalla. Here, this is a Marshall from 1983. It's a JCM 800. I used this on several tracks. Lead tones, really great. Here's another mastermind. Here's my Atari MTR 90. Great. Absolutely one of my favorite tape machines. Sounds great. Transports are wonderful. The heads have been relapped. It's just great. I try to use it whenever I can. And this is my great 2-track master, the Ampex from the 70s, a 440C. It's awesome. It just sounds so good. And here is my amp head case. I have an orange, you got the Soldano, the EVH. I use this Ampeg a lot on bass. This is an SOB from Boogie, Prosonic from Fender, and this is my Plexi, which has actually been completely modded by the Cameron mod. Okay, so this is my amp closet. And basically I have all the speakers in here. I have an Ampegs right there, an Ampeg system selector, which is a speaker selector, and you could select any speaker to any amp. So I can have all my heads here, and I can select whatever cabinet I want. And I have an orange cabinet with 2 vintage 30s, and this is a 1975 Marshall JMP that has a vintage 30s in it, and I have an Ampeg with 2 10s in it. This is my favorite mic of all time. This is an M160 Beyer Dynamic, and I use a Sennheiser as well for the bass, and I use a host of different mics for different occasions. I have the Orange Crush Pro here. This is a great amp, probably one of the best sounding solid state amps you'll ever hear, and you could just go from really distorted to really clean, no tube hub, nothing. Of course I have the Boogie Mark II-C here. That's one of my Desert Island amps with an EV in here, and of course I have the 6505 PV, which is basically a 5150, and this is a 112 combo, and this thing will crank.